Okay, so before we get started, I mentioned I would warn anybody if you don't want to see ghost stories, if you don't want to hear about them, if you don't want to hear the voice that I captured, if you don't want to see Willow interacting, here's your time to go on and watch one of my other videos. If you're a naysayer and you want to say it's evil and whatnot, I've had so many comments come my way. Let me say this. The ones that I've interacted with, absolutely not. And I've actually passed on some homes when we were house hunting. Absolutely gorgeous homes, but I felt the energy. I didn't like it, so we passed on them. And I just appreciate that Ben would even listen to me about my feelings and not want us to purchase a house because of that. But if you're going to leave negative, weird comments and say that I'm a devil worshiper and all that, don't even bother. It's just going to get deleted. This is my happenings, my belief, and I've had way too many other kindred spirits come to me with their stories. Way too many of us have had happenings, and you can't just sweep that under the rug. And I do believe that you can be in a home that some people will have happenings and then another homeowner won't. It might be that you believe in it more. It might believe that you're receptive to it more. It might be that they want you to hear them, and other times they're just going to stay back and be quiet, like this house. Nothing has happened inside, but outside I did have something happen where I was in the woods and it was winter and I was out cutting some brush, and I saw Ben walking towards me from our backyard field, very open, walking towards me in the woods. And I just literally looked down and looked up, and I didn't see him anymore. And I thought he was hiding behind a tree. And what I saw was him in a black cap, saw him clear as day, canvas coat, walking, arms swinging. And I ended up texting him, and I'm like, "Where are you?" I was waiting for him to pop out from behind a tree. And he said, "I'm still in the barn with Ben, my stepson." I'm like, "Well, I just saw you walking towards me." He says, "We have not left the garage." So he started walking my way. Ben came out of the garage just to make sure it wasn't somebody in our yard. And when he started walking towards me, clear as day, what I saw was as clear as Ben walking towards me. He walked my way, I walked his, and there was nobody there. I would say a couple months later, one of the past homeowners who used to live here, she lived here from 2 years old, her parents owned the house. She came in her 80s, and she gave me a poem about her father. When I saw the title of this, I had to share my ghost story, and she does believe there was a connection. And this was also a Davis who lived there. We have not found any relationship whatsoever to my husband. But yeah, so this story I do believe was who I saw, and it was written by his son, John. Father, who used to walk in the woods all the time. And when I told her the story, she firmly believes it was him. He is buried up the street here. So I do feel that that was an absolute happening, because I really, now that I think about it more, I only saw the upper portion of this person. I didn't see the legs or anything, but it didn't calculate in my brain of what I was seeing. So other than that, and just something I'll show you with the happening, we don't have a lot happening in this house. Maybe a handle will click, but that could be that it was stuck in the up position. So yeah, this house, nothing, but I have been in a lot of houses that are haunted. So I'm gonna read some stories here that I have on the computer. So many more happened than what I have in writing. I'm gonna show you some videos of Willow interacting with our resident. And then I'm going to show you or not show you, you're going to see and hear the voice that I captured a couple years ago. I didn't even know it. I didn't even know that voice was there until a couple months ago or last month when I told you I was going to create this story. I was listening to an old video, just watching myself, and clear as day, there was this male voice. He does come in later during the video. I can hear him coming in and talking, and he's even tried to make the voice and the sound, and it's not him and it's not me. and it's not Willow. And we lived alone at the time. So you be the judge. This is going to be kind of a long video. I hope you enjoy, and I'm going to timestamp it, so if you'd like, you can fast forward, but don't fast forward too much. I want you to be surprised. So here we go. Here's our ghost stories. Well, hello, kindred spirits. I promised you some ghost stories from our past house. And it's been taking me a while because I was trying to find some old videos. And the reason I decided to do this is I have a voice capture that I never even knew I had. I was looking at old videos a couple months ago, and in the video, I've got 4 words, clear as day. 4 words. And I'm going to play that a little bit later. I'm going to tease you with some other things, because this house, from the day we moved in, I knew it was active, but I didn't realize how active it would be. And let me start by also saying that it was never malicious. It was never harmful. If anything, it was playful. It is what we would call our resident. And we actually miss our resident. It would play with bells and whatnot and was very mischievous. But I have also on my computer, I was trying to figure out how I would do this with you. And I figured, well, I'll just read some of these notes, because after a while, I only have maybe 20 entries here. I started to keep track of some of the happenings to see if there was a pattern. So I have some personal stories I'm going to share with you. I have some videos of Willow, our Labradoodle, interacting with our resident. I have a fun little short video where I'm actually pulling bones and clothing out of the old fireplace. Now, I'll say right now, we found out it wasn't human, but wait till you see. Actually, detectives got involved. And then I'll do the voice. And then at the end, I actually have a story that I read last year or 2 years ago. I don't think I ever played it. It's a ghost story about a boat in Gloucester, and it's named after one of Ben's relatives. So I figured I would throw that in since I took the time to tape it. That's what I think I will do right now. So let me go through some of these calendar of events, and I'm not sure if I'm going to edit photos over it or what I'll do, but I figured I would start with that. So we were in the house from 2018, early 2018, until 2021. And my first entry here is December 19th. And I'm going to try to remind myself another story to tell you that I don't think was the resident of the house. Well, let me take a step back, because I don't think it's in here. We don't believe this was the resident of the house for what I'm going to share with you right now. We think it was actually a family member. We were in what was the guest bedroom at the time, and it was early in the morning. Ben and I were in bed sleeping. My stepdaughter was in her bedroom sleeping, and we clearly heard the sound of coins dropping, to the point that, you know, I was semi-awake. It woke me up. It woke Ben up. We both asked, did you just hear something hit the floor? And I'm like, absolutely, it sounded like coins dropping. It's a sound that you would recognize. So I got up, and sure enough, there was one coin. It was a dime, actually, right near the door on the way out, right near the threshold. All right, but it sounded like more than one. So I opened the door. On the other side of the threshold was another dime. And we both just like, that is so weird, you know, because we heard them fall. It's not like we dropped it, and my stepdaughter wouldn't do anything like that. So we went downstairs and thought it was weird, and I don't think I journaled it here. And then Ben looked up after he was online on Facebook, and he said, oh my gosh, I just realized today's my mother's birthday. And not only was it her birthday, it was her siblings' birthdays, but different years. 3 of the, I think 5, Ben will correct me, but 3 of them had the same birthday but different years. And he did say to me, would you go upstairs and check any of the other doors to see if there's a third coin? Sure enough, I went upstairs. I'm getting goosebumps right now. I went upstairs. There was a third dime on the outside of Emma's bedroom door. So that's why we feel it wasn't the resident. We feel at that point that his family members were just visiting, saying hi, and visiting our new home. So that was one of the very odd ones that Ben started to really go, okay, this is getting real. So I have this titled as Ghost Happening every time something happened, and there could be some others here. So some of these I wrote as a journal entry, some were just quick notes. And I was reading some of these real quick the other day. I didn't even remember half of these stories, so I'm so glad that I wrote them down. So if I stutter or stop, I'm just trying to figure out what I meant when I was typing. So this one says, I'm not sure of the time since I'm adding this later, but it was the day of my cookie exchange party, and I was telling the ladies about some of the odd happenings in the house when all of a sudden we heard something being dropped on the floor above us. When I went upstairs, 2 tape dispensers I had used for wrapping gifts were in the middle of the floor, and that was an unfinished room. So what I meant there, and I do have a picture, I took it of the tape. I was literally at this table, but at the other house, and we had 6 or 5 friends there, and I was telling the story. Right above us, we heard the ting ting, and I just looked at them and I said, we have to go see what that was. And sure enough, in the middle of this empty room were 2 tape dispensers, and I don't know what the third thing is in that picture. I'll have to maybe zoom in on it, but I do have a photo I'm showing you here. And the desk that I was wrapping on was 6 to 8 feet away, so clear as day, and it happened, and that's why I said this resident was mischievous. It knew I was telling stories, and it did something to show that he was real, and it happened more than once. You know, we would ask for lights to flicker and he would make it flicker, but anyways, and I call it he, and I'll tell you another reason why later. So this is September 14th. Walked into the office at 6 a.m., thought Willow was following me and walking on the floor at the same time. I got my chills. I do get chills. I don't know how much to tell you, but I do believe I can feel when there's a presence. I'll go into that later, but I have what I call left side chills that happen whenever something's going on. That house, other houses. I got my left side chills, looked around, and she was not there. She came in shortly after I realized she was not walking beneath my feet. 8 minutes later, Will and I were sitting on the sofa, and 3 loud creaking steps on the stairway. I thought Ben was coming down, but it wasn't him. Let's see, some of these aren't going to make sense the way I typed them, I know. Oh, this day had 2 happenings. Okay, September 17th, 2019. Ben yelled out during a ghost show we were watching, "Prove you are here." And about 10 minutes later, very loud and a long noise like wine glasses being hit together happened in the dining room. Before that, I was in the dining room and heard the trash barrel move on the floor. Later, I realized it sounded more like the heavy lid of an empty glass container with the glass lid. I know the way I'm reading this might not make sense, but this particular one is, we were sitting there, we heard what I thought was wine glasses, but it was playing with a canister that was on the table, because a lot of times I will go in and try to duplicate the sound. And at this point, I think I'll also mention is, I love to try to debunk first. I don't think everything is a ghost. I will try to find the reason, if it was traffic making something vibrate, if it was the radio, if like sometimes walking floors will shift and follow later. I get all that. I've lived in old houses my whole life, and this is not the first haunted house I've lived in. So this is kind of old news to me, but this I've never had happen as much. So the second time that day, around 8:30 p.m., while I was in the refrigerator, I heard the contractor's trash barrel again next to me being slid on the floor as if it was slightly being pushed about an inch or so, but I didn't see it happen. It just startled me since it happened right next to me while I was focused on taking something out of the fridge. At this point, the fridge was in the dining room. November 2nd. Oh, I remember this one. I woke to see a shadow move from the side of the bed and disappeared. I had no scary feeling though, since unsure of what I saw. The next morning, Ben told me he was woken by a girl's voice around 3:30, 4 o'clock saying, "Oh, great," as if in frustration. But it's just an odd coincidence that it happened the same time-ish that I saw the shadow. So when I reread this the other day and saw the "oh, great," and he said it was a girl's voice, I didn't remember this story, but the voice that you're going to hear later is absolutely a male voice. And I have a friend who sent this male voice clip off to one of the people who are part of Ghost Hunters, and they said it was a real capture. So I can't wait for you to see that. I'm going to keep teasing you with that because everything else is you're taking my word for it. Oops, I just hit my mic. You're taking my word for it. And the voice, you can't, you could make that up if you were wanting to, but I didn't. Okay, here's another 2 times this day. Middle of the night, I knew Ben was out of bed and heard him talking to Willow to see if she was all right. She was choking or coughing on something for hours before, and I was even sleeping near her crate until she fell asleep. He did not hear me, so I asked again, "Is Willow okay?" No answer, so I got up to see, and Willow was sitting up, but no Ben. He was downstairs, and he had been for about 20 minutes. Let me see here. So what was I saying? I heard him talking to Willow. Okay, so he wasn't there. In the middle of the afternoon, Ben came into the kitchen and asked me, "What?" And I asked him what he said that for. He said, "I heard you calling me from the kitchen," which I was not. I wish these were a little more clear for me to read to you, but woke to the fire alarm going off 3 times. And I should mention, the fire alarm went off the first night we moved there, and they're like controlled, all electrified, connected, and this happened pretty much throughout the time we stayed at the house, and I'll explain why I think that happened later. But woke to the fire alarm going off 3 times. The only reason I think it's odd, I mentioned it right here. So the only reason I think that's odd is when we first moved in, I specifically wondered if the home at one point had been on fire. We even had our toaster unplugged when we first moved in several times, which made me think the same thing. Was there a fire? This is before we got confirmation last year of all the fire damage in the kitchen and the rooms above. So there was a time where we would start hearing a noise and I would go in the kitchen and try to replicate it. And when Ben said that was it, I was actually moving the cord on the toaster, which was unplugged. We'd leave it plugged in. It was unplugged several times when we lived there. So I do remember saying, I wonder if there was a fire in this house at one point, because that fire alarm kept going off. And we did find a lot of fire damage when we were doing remodeling. I think I showed that in a lot of my Instagram videos. Okay, this is June 27th, 2020. I was videotaping outside in the dark and literally wandering around and felt like someone was watching, but I was not scared. Then I heard a noise from the kitchen and thought it was Ben, but it wasn't. I found a little later that a wreath that was hung over the sink had fallen. That's not weird, but the fact that the hook had been there since last Christmas and it decides to fall as I was imagining somebody was watching me is what is a bit strange. I get chills. Coincidence? Most likely, but I did write some of these down. July 4th. Okay, a dime that I first dug up in the yard, then placed in the living room on the table, was there for over a month. Was found Wait a minute, is this a different one? This is a different dime story. I did not remember this. Okay, let me start this. A dime that I first dug up in the yard, then placed in the living room on the table for over a month, was found on the threshold of Emma's door the morning of July 4th. It was not there the night before. Ben, Emma, or I would have seen it. I left it in the morning, I saw it, and Emma ended up picking it up and brought it down to show me. She would have done that same thing the night before. Emma is so focused on certain things, and she would have noticed a dime at her doorway. But that was the dime that I found and dug up from the yard. So I didn't even remember that. Like I said, I'm reading these for the first time since 2020, actually. Let's see. I was wide awake, thinking about going downstairs when I heard a noise on my bedside table. I went to reach for my glasses in the dark and barely lifted them and dropped them. So I picked up my glasses and dropped them by accident and realized that was the sound that I heard. The sound of my glasses slightly being lifted and dropped on my nightstand. Coincidence? At 4:44, my favorite numbers, Willow was outside and I kept looking out for her. Then all of a sudden, the door that was not shut tight opened and Willow was standing there. It did not seem windy at all, but who knows? So I was kind of thinking to myself that somebody was letting Willow in. There was no wind, the door just opened. Once again, could have been coincidence. I decided to write that down. I even wrote coincidence. This says ghost happening possible. I was filming in front of the house, facing the door, and on camera caught a white moving object. I don't remember this. Could have been a bug, but seems to disappear before I think a bug would in the video. So a lot of times, and now I'm remembering this a bit, you'll see orbs going around in so many other people's videos. The green ones are usually because of the camera and a light. Dust and bugs will cause white orbs for sure. But some of the time when the orbs go in very slow motion, when they go into a certain direction, which I do have another video I'm going to show you later from this house. Thought I would insert that little video clip here. So you're not looking at the larger spot, you're looking at the small one that's going actually behind my head there. And at first I was thinking it was just the light reflection that I did catch on the mantle, but it's going at a whole different speed, and that is of course slowed down. Another thing I'm noticing just now, there is a little light trail behind it. I'm going to play this loop a couple times. And I only have one ghost story from this house, unfortunately. And so, could have been a bug, but a lot of times when they're a lot slower motion or they have some really odd movement, it makes you wonder. And you'll see a video later with some of those orbs. Okay, December 3rd, 2020. I was in my office with the door closed and I heard what I thought was Ben or Willow pacing in front of the door. It sounded more like Ben because of the weight, and I wondered why he was not coming in. I got up to see what he was doing and no one was there. I texted to ask where he was and he said he was outside with Willow in the driveway. Now I will mention, I ended up making a friend in town and didn't know she used to own our home. And I started telling her about some of my stories, wondering if she had some strange happenings, and she absolutely did. And my office used to be her bedroom, and she told me that, I don't know how constantly or how much it happened, but she told me many times that she would hear pacing in front of the door, the jiggling of the door handle, and her now husband at the time didn't believe her. So this is not just us that had this happen. It was an owner from 20 years before us. And at our closing, I even asked the owners, do you have ghosts? I always ask for old houses. And one said yes, one said no. And I said to myself, that means yes. So that, you know, it was kind of neat to hear that the previous owner had happenings also. December 5th, 2020. I was taking photos in the sitting room and heard clear, heavy walking about 5 steps overhead in my office. The floor actually creaked a bit. I thought Ben came home early from work from his day out with Matt or Willow walking around. It sounded too heavy for Willow, but I looked for her and she was laying on the sofa. I remember that particular one, I was afraid somebody was in the house, but I looked around and nobody was there. February 1st, 2021. We were watching TV and I don't remember when all of a sudden a very strong, clear smell of body odor wafted past me and went away just like that. and it was none of us. I did the smell check after. So that was weird. I'm so glad I wrote these because I don't remember any of this happening. February 4th, 2021. Around 11:30 or noon, Ben said he and Willow both heard footsteps from the office as if somebody was behind him. They actually went to look and nothing. I was in New Hampshire. This is the third time he heard stuff from his office, thinking it was me coming from my office. The other 2 times, the happening was playing with things outside the hall, Christmas things, I should add. So our resident used to love playing with jingle bells. We had them on doors, we had them in boxes, and the ones that happened in the boxes really just completely blew my mind of like, you know, there's nothing that's gonna go in a box and play with jingle bells. And it wasn't Willow or us. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to read this for a second. Ben had just left in the truck with Willow and I headed upstairs to my office. I was just going to type and tell Carla Ben's ghost story of yesterday when all of a sudden I heard the string of bells that were hanging from the kitchen door ring loudly once, then again twice, as if it was being shook. I knew Ben left, but texted him just to make sure the sound was not him opening and closing the door. The bells were there for Willow to let us know when she had to go outside to potty. He was not home. I went downstairs to see if anyone else came in because I started getting once again nervous. But if that was the case, wet snow prints would have shown on the kitchen floor. The floor was bone dry. I'm sitting now in my office with the video camera going because I know if I had caught it, the sound of bells would have told him or her to do it again if they wanted. That didn't make sense, but what I remember I did now was I put my camera on just in case the bells rung again, I would get it. But I'm going to see if I have any videos from February 5th and give it a listen. Let's see here. I have more here than I thought. I hope I'm not boring you. Some of these I might cut out. May 26, 2021. I left my office with a fan on purpose while I went for a walk with Ben. I looked at it to make sure I did not flick off the light switch because the switch goes to the outlet. So I was making sure I didn't touch the switch. I looked at the fan to make sure it was on. I remember asking myself, would it be safe to leave while I go for a walk? We walked from 9 to 10, and when I returned to the office, the fan was off. The only way to shut off the toggle switch was the light switch. The lights were still on, but the fan was off. So our resident went to the fan and did the toggle on the fan and not the wall switch. Does that make sense? I usually shut it off by the wall switch. I never touched the toggle, and it was shut off by the toggle switch. Oh, let's see here. I'll read this out loud, but so I have here also, I get one of my odd headaches. When I get the left side chills, I also get odd headaches sometimes. Sometimes I'll get nauseous when I'm in a room that there is a resident in, whether our house or another one. But June 25th. All right, this is another fire alarm thing in June. As soon as the fire alarm started going off, I asked what day it was and noted it on paper before I put it here in the computer. This is the 3rd year in a row that the fire alarms went off in our house a day or 2 off. All right, so that is, I just made a note. It does not have to do with batteries and a year since some of them were recently changed. Ben even changed the batteries in our bedroom. So I guess I realized at that point that the fire alarms were going off in June. And I do remember now that I was trying to see if I could find and prove that our house fire happened in June, but I never was able to confirm that. Ben found a penny on the top of his folded laundry in the basket in the dressing room when he carried it up. He asked if I put it there. I did not. I did see it earlier and thought he put it there to tease me. He said he did not. Okay, that could be a coincidence. Okay, didn't remember this either. I was working the basement, moving things around and organizing when all of a sudden I heard a soft, airy type of whistling, which sounded to me more like a man, if I were to guess. Okay, now I'm going to get chills because I do now know that there was a male voice that I captured. It was as if they were working around the basement too. It was long enough for me to hear and know it was nothing else in the basement or coming from outside, which I did look, and Ben was out walking with Willow far away. I hope these are making sense. Ghost happening, 2 short alarm bursts for fire alarm, July 9th. That's all I have. August 3rd. While videotaping the bedroom, I noticed my bedside lamp was out, the right side looking at the bed. Right side looking. I went to check, it was loose. When I twisted it, it worked. The next day, it went out again. What? I went to check, it was loose, and when I twisted it, it worked. The next day, it went out again. As I was going to get a bulb, the light started working again. It happened the day before at 11:30 and at 4:50. That could just be a loose bulb. I don't know why I typed that. The light bulb that went out twice next to my bedside came back on today. Okay. August 9th. I was taking one of my long hot baths when I heard Ben walking outside the door and down the stairs. I felt guilty he was going downstairs for water, or because I was in the bathroom. I got out of the tub, dressed, then went out and said sorry for taking so long and that you could have come into the bathroom to get water. It was not Ben. He had not gotten out of bed, and Willow was sound asleep. Now, I wish I could tell you all of the other stories that happened with this. I started this calendar when a really first strong happening happened, when I was sitting on the sofa and I heard what I thought was a mouse on the bookshelf next to me. I'm not afraid of mice, I just don't want to be startled. So I stood up on the sofa, I looked at the shelf to see the mouse, I didn't see anything. So I grabbed my iPad and I texted Ben, who went upstairs to bed, and I said out loud what I'm typing, because I was doing it with the voice. I'm like, quick, come downstairs, there's a mouse. Seconds later, I hear him coming down the stairs, but he didn't come around the corner. And I'm thinking, what's he doing? Is he trying to startle me? So I snuck off the sofa and I jumped in front of the stairs to say boo, and I looked and there was nobody there. I got chills. I kind of looked and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? So I ran up the stairs, the whole way running. I got the goosebumps. I went into our bedroom and he's in bed on his iPad, and I'm like, was that you coming down the stairs? He goes, no, I'm just seeing your text now. I was reading. And I told him the story, and that was kind of when I first started writing this down. But my first tour of the house, when we bought it, I was in what was then going to be our new master bedroom. I was walking and I heard and felt a breath in my ear. And when I first walked into the kitchen, I felt something touch my arm, and I was actually looking for spider webs. The house was clean. There was not spider webs, but I felt something touch my arm, and that used to happen a lot in the home too. So so let me show you some of these videos. This is going to be Willow interacting with it when she was very little. And she didn't like it when she was little. She would hide. And I ended up starting to videotape her because it happened so often. But she would look for it. She would hide by me. And even when she got older, though, she would start to interact. And that you will see as well. So like I just mentioned, Willow did this a lot through her whole lifetime at the other home. But I ended up starting to videotape her when she was little because she was definitely getting startled by something. She would hide by me while she was looking up and around corners. And I was actually starting to look around to make sure nothing was there either. But in these next few clips, you're going to see how she looks around and hears things and will hide and then come back to me. I'd like to mention also, and I'm realizing this even more watching these videos and hearing the stories that I wrote down, a lot of what she's looking at in the room she's going to are the rooms that had the activities. The front living room, the dining room, the kitchen, our bedroom, and the office. As she got older, it got a little bit more intense with how she would interact or not want to leave her room. And I just got a few times here on video, but it was very often that she would act like this and interact, and sometimes I would get nervous. I would wonder if somebody was in the house. And in this particular video, I was trying to get scaredy pants to go in front of me because I was scared too. Once again, I thought somebody was in the house. And I'm actually coaxing her, come on, let's go, let's go. And she didn't want to. And you're going to see her finally go a little bit and hesitate and start looking around. And I should mention that absolutely nobody else is home at this point. So that's why I was wondering, if somebody was in the house. But if I thought it was just our resident, I probably wouldn't have been as concerned, because this time she was really, really acting as if she heard something. Where she's looking right now, I'm going to insert a little story here because she's looking pretty close to where I saw one of my shadows. I'm sitting here editing the ghost video, and I forgot one of the main things that I saw in our home was one morning, or it might have been afternoon, I walked towards my office, and very clear, very, very clear, against the wall, I saw a very tall shadow, felt and knew right away it was male. I'm gonna say it was about 6 feet tall, could even been taller, very slender, and I was so startled. And I remember saying out loud, "You are not allowed to show yourself in front of me again, because that's just too much." And from that point on, I never saw anything. So I saw the shadow in front of the bed. I saw that particular one. That was a full silhouette that I saw. And from that point on, every time I turned the corner to go to my office, I was kind of expecting to see said shadow, but never did again. So I wanted to add that little tidbit of information as well. Now this is on another day, and Willow is absolutely doing little quiet barks, and she's going to start interacting, laying down and looking, and I think you'll see what I see as just a little bit different and off for her. When she started doing this little motion as if she was, once again, listening to somebody, it really caught my attention even more. And as you can see, there is nobody there. The volume on this old video was not that good, so I'm going to just talk over it right now. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the bones that you're going to see ended up being animal. But when you see the bones that I pull out of here, the clothing pieces, the buttons, the snaps, buckles, I ended up calling the local police department because I was starting to get concerned that there was some bad activities here that happened in the home. A detective came out to the house, his eyes wide open when he even saw the bone from part of a spine, took it to his office. People looked at it there. They couldn't figure it out. They sent it to another place for a visual. They thought human. Then they sent it off to Boston to be tested. Coming to find out, they were cow and pig bones. But it was confirmed that these bones were here for a very long time. So it kind of blows my mind that nobody cleaned out this ash pit in this home for 60, maybe 80 years, because I was finding clay pipe remnants in here. I was trying to figure out the type of font from newspaper things. So as you can see, these bones here, it was a bit startling. And when I was realizing we had a haunted house, and you're going to see in a moment, I dug up what looks like an old gravestone. And then I should also mention that it looks like our house had old gravestone fragments used for part of the construction. So you never know. But once again, they were animal, but still, this was not cleaned out, and there are remnants here of past activities. And this is actually the evidence bag that the detective took off with the bones. It was kind of fun. Okay, are you ready to hear the ghost voice? Now, I did realize that Ben was home, but this is not him, I can assure you. He's somewhere in another room in the background, but what you're going to hear was right next to the camera microphone, and I'm going to play it a couple times. I'm going to tell you what you're going to hear, though. What I'm pretty sure it's saying is, "Oh no," and then there's a pause, and then there's a "what now?" And those two words, that made me think of the "oh great" that Ben heard. Oh, and I want to mention again that I just found this voice capture. This video is about 3 years old. I would have shared this a long time ago. Here, let me play that again for you, then I'm going to slow it down a bit, and you be the judge. I apologize for this video because I was not planning on sharing it with everybody. I was actually videotaping my computer screen so I could then slow it down. This video is from our Nest Cam. We actually just had it facing in the living room to see what Willow did at night because she would disappear, and she's sleeping on the sofa. What you're going to see, and this happens a couple times, something goes in front of the camera back and forth,
And on the first video clip, Willow opens her eye, you can see it glow, and then we'll start seeing some things come from the fireplace. Now, this is when I say, okay, these could be bugs, but it happens every time something goes in front of the camera. Okay, now something is going to go back and forth in front of the camera, and this is zoomed in. I'll show you a little zoom out in a moment, but it starts to block the camera, and looks odd because I slowed it down to see what I was seeing. Willow's eye opens, so she obviously heard or felt something, and then you're going to see a little bit of a glow happen in the fireplace. Things start coming from the fireplace over and over and over. Now, I watched this video all night, and this only happened for a short time. Once again, I'm sitting in my office, I'm taking a video of my screen, slowing it down so I could figure out what the heck I was seeing. And like I said, that blackout happens a few times. Now, something else is going to come out in the lower right of the fireplace, a little bit of a glow there. I guess what I'm doing is slowing down, seeing that thing go back and forth again. And then a little bit of a glow. I'm sure a lot of this is boring for some, but being a geek like I am, I was really trying to figure out what I was capturing. I kept seeing little glows and glimmers, and I don't remember the season, but I know we did not use the fireplace. It is not embers. I know the damper was closed because I checked that afterwards, so we didn't have wind or anything coming inside. Something just floated out of the fireplace there. The timestamp on the computer screen is actually when I was watching this. Once again, this is from our Nest Cam that I had to download, and I had some other pretty funky ghost videos, but we can no longer access that old video. And boy, did you see that one come out of the fireplace? I wish I knew that I was going to be sharing this because I would have done a better video, but this was taken years ago and it was all generated because I saw that black shadow go back and forth, and the whole night nothing happened other than that shadow, and then soon after the shadow is when these orbs started showing up. Just to let you know, after this next little segment, I am going to read a haunted ship story. Otherwise, thank you for watching.
Well, I hope you liked my ghost stories. I know, some of the reading of these took a long time. I might edit this down, but yeah, I'm a believer. I have been since I was a little girl. I've had way too many happenings not to believe. So there you have it. This ghost story is actually written about a boat that was named after one of my husband's ancestors. It is called the Charles Haskell, and it was built by one of his third cousins, 6-time removed, Samuel Haskell, and the boat was named after his second cousin, 6-time removed. So I thought I would read this story for you. So let's get started. From the beginning, the Charles Haskell had at best a risky future. Built in 1869 at Story's Boatyard in Essex, Massachusetts, this handsome schooner was rigged for hunting codfish on the Grand Banks of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, which is still among the more hazardous occupations, especially in the winter when the gales are at their fiercest. In those waters between 1830 and 1892, nearly 600 ships and over 3,000 lives were lost. Since cod were caught with hand lines, it was necessary for ships to drop anchor, and understandably, every vessel sought the same spot where they would catch the most plentiful amount of fish. Consequently, a great many ships were anchored in close proximity on a cold and treacherous tossing piece of the ocean. Winter storms made this especially perilous. The tide and wind would easily drag the anchor, or worse, part a ship from her moorings. When such occurred, the helmsman had the sole and nearly impossible chore of keeping his vessel from hitting either dangerous shoals or another ship, as not in a dense fog. That doesn't make sense to me. Often another crew, seeing that they were about to be rammed, would be forced to cut their own cables to avoid collision, which in turn would lead to yet another ship cutting their cables, and so on, until the seas became a bedlam of rolling runaway ships, desperately attempting to avoid each other, and a disaster for the entire fleet. In view of such menacing conditions, it's small wonder that codfishers were highly superstitious men, most anxious to avoid any and all signs of bad luck. A curse from such an omen was put upon the Charles Haskell even before its launching. A workman, who had been making a final inspection of the ship, was found dead of a broken neck at the bottom of one of her companionways. Immediately, the skipper, who was to take her on the maiden voyage, renounced his command. A year passed before the vessel was taken on by another one, Captain Curtis of Gloucester. The winter of 1870 was a severe one. A winter had hit George's Bank, where 100 fishing craft, among them the Charles Haskell, were at work. Like many other vessels, the Haskell was at one point forced to be cut loose from her anchor, trying to avoid a collision. Though for all her skipper's skills, she could not, and she consequently rammed another ship. The Haskell's crew heard only the brief, terrified cries from the fishermen of the anonymous vessel as they went down in their watery doom. The men on the Haskell prepared themselves for the same fate, for it was rare for either ship to survive such a collision. Miraculously, however, the Haskell remained afloat and safely sailed back to Gloucester, where Captain Curtis learned that the boat he had hit was the Andrew Johnson out of Salem. Not being satisfied with what surely seemed the best of luck, the seamen of Gloucester now felt uneasy about the marvelous escape of the tainted Haskell. The devil had a hand in it, they muttered, and the Haskell's decks were stained with the blood of the Andrew Johnson's crew. That Captain Curtis, hotly denied responsibility for the mishap, did not alter the fact that by all the rights and holy, the Haskell should have sank. The following spring, Curtis took Haskell up the banks again. The weather was fine and the cod plentiful. On the sixth night out, the midnight watch was swept by a sudden chill and then arrested by a strange parade. 26 seamen, in streaming oilskins, with cold, blank eyes and dim faces, were climbing over the Haskell's rail. In silent procession, they took their place on the fishermen's benches and baited and dropped invisible lines into the water. At once, the two men on watch knew who the phantoms were. They summoned the captain, and all hands fearfully surveyed the deck. Unperturbed, the ghostly crew completed their task and then, in single file and deathly silence, climbed over the rail and sank back into the sea. Captain Curtis lost no time in heading for home, but another midnight passed before he reached Gloucester, and again the apparitions from the Andrew Johnson came aboard the Haskell to repeat their spectral pantomime. Then, just at the entrance to the Gloucester harbor, they rose, and one by one climbed over the rail, and with a final glassy glance at Captain Curtis, headed in procession across the water over to Salem. From that time on, no man would crew for the Haskell, and she spent the rest of her days in port, finally falling to ruin alongside a Gloucester pier. And some of you who have seen some of my other videos, the story that was also mentioned here, the wharf that it was on, is part of my family line, and that is one of the lines that Ben and I are connected to, the stories. One moved off to Essex, and my family moved off to Marblehead. But that is the story of the Charles Haskell.